Hey, in this video, what I really want to talk about is something that's actually been coming up frequently in some sessions the last couple of weeks. I thought, okay, there's something in the air. We need to talk about it. And it's this idea of kind of when the going gets tough, throwing out what we know is right and works. And it makes perfect sense why this happens sometimes. We get stirred up when the going gets tough. What does that mean? It's hard, it's challenging, it tests us, it forces us to call into question things that we think we know, and all of our self-doubt, our inner critic, our gremlin, our ego, our protector parts, whatever modality of this work you subscribe to, we're all talking about the same thing, which is that aspect of ourselves that winds up almost being like a self-sabotage, because it's that little voice inside us telling us we're not good enough, we're doing something wrong, we're bad, we're messed up, whatever, right? That's what happens when the going gets tough. And then what happens? We start to throw out all of the things that we actually know are right and effective and appropriate in these situations. And I want to give you some concrete examples so that you can really see what I'm talking about. First example is from a session that I did yesterday, actually, with a mom whose son is struggling with depression. And he has talked off and on in the past about hurting himself or killing himself, or all of the things that understandably, talk about when the going gets tough, understandably, really are hard to hear and call and bring up all of those fears and self-doubt and inner critic of like, how do I handle this? I must not be doing the right thing. It happens all the time in parenting. And this is a really extreme example, but it's not a very uncommon example. And I know if you're watching this video that there's parents out there who've been in a similar situation to this, and it is very hard to keep your head on straight when something this scary and upsetting gets brought up with your kids. But what happens, right? In this session with this mom, we had talked throughout this whole session, and at this point we're several months into our work together, so we've talked many times about what is the gold standard of parenting. And from a therapeutic or parenting expert standpoint, the gold standard in parenting is attunement with our children. That is the number one thing we can do to kind of give them a protective factor against mental illness in the future, and all of their like health and success in life. Attunement is the number one thing, attuning with your child. And in order to attune with our child, we need to do our own work so that our egos don't get in the way and we don't accidentally go down a route of codependency with our kids instead. So what does that look like? It looks like releasing shame. It looks like letting our kids own their problems, being there to support them and kind of be a mirror for them to see their reflection in, not trying to fix their problems, not getting upset when they struggle, all of those things. That is the gold standard of parenting. And this mom thought that she was totally bought into that. It made perfect sense to her. She's had a million wins in a million different areas in her life implementing this new approach. And it is something that she has worked really hard to integrate, and she sees it. She has drunk the Kool-Aid. This is how she sees the world. Well, then her son says, I want to kill myself. And what happens? All of a sudden, she's coming to me in a session saying, well, but the stakes are really high right now. So I think I really need to get involved in this other way where I'm like telling him what he needs to do, where I'm trying to help him not feel depressed anymore, where I am intervening in ways that completely violate this principle of attunement and moving away from codependency. And we had a really amazing conversation where I kind of, once again, holding up the mirror, right? That's my job as a coach to say, so let me make sure that I understand this. Like, you believe that this is the absolute best that you could do for your child. And now when your child is struggling the most, you want to not give him the absolute best. You want to go down back to more ineffective parenting that was like triggered by your own emotional stuff, right? And she's like, well, when you put it that way, right? But it makes perfect sense. Oh my gosh, me stepping back and letting my child go on this journey of depression and possible suicidal ideation, That seems like a really, really, really scary choice. Are you sure this is the gold standard in parenting? There must be something more. And that happens all the time. It's really easy from the cheap seats to sit and say, oh, sure, attunement with our kids and we're moving away from codependency and into interdependency and a healthier dynamic with our kids. Of course, that's the gold standard. That's how we should handle parenting problems. Except when this comes up and it's really, really, really upsetting to me, I'm going to throw that away. Well, yeah, that doesn't work. Unfortunately, the best thing this mom can do for her kids, even in this high stakes situation, is still attuning with her child and moving away from codependency. That doesn't mean she does nothing. It doesn't mean she doesn't take her kid to see a therapist. It doesn't mean that she doesn't speak up and voice what she sees to her son, any of those things. But doing that from a place of not codependency, from total attunement with your child, will make it 10 times more effective, is literally the best possible thing she can do for her son, even more so when the stakes are high. And the other example I want to give you of this is a client of mine who's working on releasing shame. That's that piece of like, it's really hard not to be codependent when you have a ton of shame messaging going on. So this mom is working on releasing her shame in her experience with her kids. Well, guess what happens? And this is, we all do this, okay? So don't tell me you haven't done this. Well, yeah, most parents should release their shame because they don't need to be feeling shameful about themselves, and beating yourself up isn't going to help your kid. That's the gold standard, right? Except me, I'm really bad. So I've done something totally unforgivable as a parent. So shame is actually a good thing for me. Shame is actually useful for me. Shame is allowed in this situation, right? Because if I'm bad enough, then all of a sudden this isn't the gold standard anymore. And so what do we do as parents? We get almost like in a spitting contest to see who's the worst parent, who's allowed to feel ashamed of themselves, instead of realizing like, no, if this is the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do all the time. It's harder when the stakes are higher. Releasing shame when you've done something that you can see very well was a very egregious mistake that you've made with your child. Well, that's a lot harder. That's double black diamond parenting. That's double black diamond releasing of shame. But that doesn't mean that releasing shame is not the right choice in this moment. It just means that it's a harder choice to make. And the same thing with this kiddo who's struggling with low self-esteem and suicidal ideation. It doesn't mean that moving away from codependency and attuning to her child is the wrong choice. It just means that it's a harder choice to make because it's a harder situation, which means that our emotions are more stirred up, which means that we have to do more work and really hold ourselves to that radical accountability in order to be able to do it. And that's where I come in, right? It's my job to help you with that radical accountability. It's my job to continue to remind you and help you bring your focus back to, okay, what is my gold standard here? And what's getting in the way of me being able to execute it in this situation with zero shame, so much grace, so much love and compassion, so much patience. This is hard work. That's what my job is. If that sounds like something that's interesting to you, if it's time for you to get support in doing that, if you're ready to kind of really actually embody this gold standard in parenting and release your shame and release codependency, be able to truly attune to your child, it's time for us to be talking. Set up a free discovery call. Use the link that's in the description of this video, and we will figure this out together. Can't wait to talk to you again soon. Bye, everybody.